Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I'd like to introduce John Noltner. A Piece of Mind is a multimedia arts project created by award-winning photographer John Noltner that uses portraits and personal stories to bridge divides and encourage dialogue around important issues. Through exhibits, workshops, lectures, on-site studios, and distance learning, A Piece of Mind leads transformative experiences that help polarized world rediscover the common humanity that connects us. And with that commonality, we are connected right now. Thank you and
Yes.
welcome to my show.
Yeah, we are. Thanks, Lino. I'm really glad to be with you.
So what brought you into this incredible project that you're doing right now? How did this begin?
Yeah, I've been working on A Piece of My Mind for a dozen years now, and it started out as a small little personal project,
I
and
like how
it's
you said
now
that, a dozen years.
yeah, and it started out as this small little personal thing, and it has now grown to be the only thing that we do. I mean, it's consuming us in this wonderful and beautiful way because we're traveling the country now, trying to find people who are looking for creative solutions to some of our most challenging issues. I've always worked as a freelance photographer. I've shot for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies, but 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I started being increasingly concerned about the quality of our national dialogue. I was concerned about all these things that ask us to look at what can separate us. And I wondered if there was something I could do with my photography and storytelling to remember what connects us, to rediscover that humanity that we all share. And as luck would have it, about that same time, that was the recession, and I like to say, uh, you know, the world of freelance photography changed really dramatically. And I lost a lot of business, and I had this open space in my schedule, and I had to figure out what to do with it. And on the one hand, I was struggling myself with all of this division, with a loss of my identity as a photographer, being able to make a living doing it. So I just started reaching out and doing these interviews with people and photographing them, and building the conversations around this notion of peace. I was missing a little bit of peace in my life at that moment. And we started having these conversations, and I've done hundreds of these interviews now. We've traveled all across the country, and in the process of surrounding myself with people who believe something better is possible, it sustained me. It
Oh
kept me
yeah,
going, and
absolutely.
it helped me see a better way that we can live together.
You've mentioned at the beginning that you first did this for yourself. You were just kind of just trying it out, and then it became an everyday thing and a passionate thing. It's something that you're actually really driven to do. What motivated you to do this just for fun in the beginning before it became something that you're constant that you're doing, that you're pursuing every day?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was just looking for some connection. I was just looking for ways to understand the world. I was looking for ways to bridge divides with people and have these really interesting conversations about mission, vision, and values, and the way we move through the world and the way we can relate to one another. And so I really didn't see the big picture of what this could become right away. I was just curious in about the conversation. And so I did one interview, and I'm like, hey, that was pretty interesting.
Mhm.
And I did another interview, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And pretty soon I had a dozen stories.
Wow.
I didn't really know what to do with them. And a friend said, we should just start a website. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for a website. I want to make sure I have this whole thing figured out first. He goes, just start. You'll figure it out as you go.
True.
And that was the truth. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we get paralyzed as we wait to figure out every step in the process. And
Yes.
in that process, we just don't move. And I'm really convinced that if you start moving, the rest of it can sort of
Yeah, it'll
sort
find its
itself
way,
out.
definitely.
Yeah, it'll find
Create
its
a
way.
momentum and then keep the momentum going.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
What can you tell our listeners, our viewers, and our watchers more about what you just mentioned as far as mission, vision, and value?
it, especially now, my wife and I, Karen and I have been married for 31 years now. And the,
Congratulations.
yeah,
Awesome.
thanks. Thanks. And even now that we live in a van, we still like each other a little bit. Uh, it's close quarters, but in the fall of 2020, we sold our house and we hit the road to continue this project, to continue gathering stories. And in this most recent version, we have waded into some of the most difficult issues that we're facing as a country. We went down along the border to talk about immigration. We went into Mississippi to talk about moving Confederate monuments. We went to Skid Row to talk about housing security.
Wow.
And really, any social issue around identity or politics or faith or race or whatever it is, we're wading into it and trying to find ways to have productive conversations, trying to find people who are looking for creative solutions to those challenges. And now I lost track of your original question. What was I supposed to
Yeah, I'm
say?
just curious about your mission, your vision, and your value.
Oh,
Because you
yeah.
mentioned those three words and it just popped in my head and it sounds incredible.
Yeah. I mean, for me, my mission is to bridge divides and build community with these stories. And so we've got 3 books and we've got 4 traveling exhibits that go around the country, and we lead public programming and use these stories to talk about challenging our own expectations, to talk about listening deeply, to talk about finding the beauty and the wisdom in everybody around us. And so the goal is to help people break out of this cycle of division, challenge their expectations a little bit, and try to find a new path forward.
I like how you say that, challenging the division, because one thing that I've noticed I've been podcasting for over a year now. I think you'll be a little over 90 something episode, but
Mm.
within all these episodes, I've come to realize that it's actually the diversity that brings us together rather than there's just seems to be a lot of division still. And it's a little heartbreaking sometimes when I'm trying to bring people closer, but yet they're still wanting to stay divided. And it's, I mean, they're both these words start with a D and an I. It's like diversity, division, but we really want to diversify. And by having that diversity, we were able to have a melting pot and actually come together, and by accepting each other's differences. And how are you finding that to be true for yourself?
Well, what's interesting is that when I was working as a freelance photographer, I encountered all sorts of people. I might be working with artists one day, and I might be working with physicians the next day, and I
Wow.
might be working with civil rights
Oh
activists
yeah,
the
that's a
day after.
diversity, all right.
Yeah, yeah, right. And then the day after that, it might be pig farmers. So it was just this really wide range of humanity, but I found uh, that I enjoyed all of it. I loved the people I encountered, no matter what world they were from, because I could learn, right? I could open myself up to figure out what their lives were like and what they encountered along the way. And what, like you, what broke my heart is when I started seeing, stuff about, marginalizing Muslim people after 9/11. Things about marginalizing people based on the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or whatever, because I knew people
Sure.
from all of these groups. So when that junk was circulating, I'm like, no, that's my friend.
Yeah.
It's not this nameless, group of people over there. These are people I know. And so it broke my heart a little bit when that happened. And we have a choice. We can either sort of step aside and let that stuff swirl around us, or we can become engaged and we can try to make a difference and try to shift the needle. And I think as you go through life, if you see division everywhere, if you surround yourself with division, you're going to find it everywhere you look. But
Sure.
when you surround yourself with connection and relationship across all of the whatever those divides real perceived are, you're going to also find that connection. So it's,
Absolutely.
for me, it's about, it's about shifting your focus. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that we ignore the challenges. The world is filled with challenges. I live in Minneapolis. George Floyd was killed here in, the spring of 2020.
Mhm.
And, and that's not the only incident, but so I don't want to ignore the challenges, but I want to approach them with a grace and a hope and a belief that something better is possible. So we
It's always
try to
possible.
address those head on, but always looking for the solutions, always moving towards how do we get better? How do we bridge divide? And how do we change the systems that are in place so that it's more equitable for everybody?
How do you find people to interview?
Mm. It's there's three ways I do it. Sometimes they fall in my lap, right? I was down in Mississippi, in Columbus, Mississippi. I really wanted a day off because I was so far behind on editing. I just wanted to get a coffee from the coffee shop and go sit in front of my computer. And in the line in the coffee shop, I start talking to the guy behind me. His name is Neil Moore. And I'm like, "So what's your deal, Neil?" And he
What's your
goes,
deal, Neil?
"Well, what's your deal, Neil?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just paddling across the country. I'm canoeing 7,500 miles to try to remember what's beautiful about America." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm
Wow.
not going to have a day off at all because I can't not interview Neil,
Right.
when I find somebody like that." So
Right.
sometimes you get really lucky, but most often I'll start doing research, and so I'm about to go down into the Southwest to do stories around water scarcity, water resources. And I read an article that says, out of all of the people in the United States who don't have uh, running water in their homes, 2/3 of them are Navajo, from the Navajo Nation. And I'm like, I got to find somebody who can talk about that. So then I start digging a little bit, and I find names of people who are doing work around access to clean and safe water on the Navajo Nation. And then I reach out to them and I say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Would you be willing to sit down and talk with me?" And I look at it from all these different perspectives, and I try to find these different voices that deserve to be amplified, deserve to be heard, to help us understand these really complex issues. And a lot of times it happens by me making a connection with one person there, one person who sort of understands what I'm trying to do. And I mean, I'm always coming from the outside. So I'm like, who else do I have to talk to? Who else do you know who can help illuminate this issue and
Mhm.
can help, my audience understand these things?
And so then
And
what do you
once you find that advocate and that
yeah.
ally, um, they'll plug you in,
So what do you
so
do
that's the research that I want to do.
when you find a story like Neil or anyone else that you're looking into interviewing Navajos and it's like you get their story, what do you do with the story when you're done talking to them? Are
Yeah,
you
we
record are you recording right away or do you I mean how is it done? Is it done live? Do you bring them into your van?
Yeah, I do. No, that sounds really sketchy when you say it
Yeah,
like
I
that.
know, right?
We're not
Yeah,
doing
it
the
kind of
interviews in
does.
my van.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not that guy. Uh, no, we do the interviews wherever the people are comfortable. So
Got
sometimes that means outside, sometimes that means at their home, sometimes it means at a third place that's meaningful to them.
it. Hmm.
And we sit down and we record an hour-long interview, and I'm a photographer, so then I do a portrait. And sometimes, the portrait will take an hour plus as well, because I like to find a space that gives some context to who the person is. I like to find something that visually adds to the story, but I always do the interview first because it lets us get to know each other a little bit better. It gives
Right.
them a level of comfort so they can relax and open up a little bit.
And then you get a
And
more natural photography after that.
yeah, you get a more natural photo, and sometimes they say things in the conversation that help me figure out what to do for the picture. I interviewed a man in Philadelphia named Tyrone Wirtz, and he served 36 years of a life sentence for second-degree murder. His sentence was commuted and he was released from prison a year before the interview. And when I was interviewing him at the end, I said, Tyrone, I don't know if this is really okay to even ask. I said, but it would be really powerful, I think, to photograph you in front of the house where the murder happened. How do you feel about that? And that's not a question I could have even asked Tyrone until we'd spent an hour
Right. Oh
together.
yeah, definitely. Right.
We had to build that relationship. And I think sometimes people jump right into the really difficult stuff before they take the time to build that foundation and lay that groundwork to treat each other like human beings.
And so at the after getting a photographer, getting an incredible image like that, what do you do with the images and what do you do with the interview?
Yeah, we post them online. We share them on our website at peaceofmymind.net. We have a podcast called A Piece of My Mind where people can hear the interviews just like yours. But then over time, we have shared some of them in books. And we've shared some of them in exhibits. And like I say, we have these traveling exhibits that we install on college campuses. Right now, we've got one at a church in Minneapolis. We'll do community centers and conferences. And we use those stories to create a space that invites people into dialogue, that invites people to realize that if there are problems in the world, and there are, that
Sure.
these are our problems. And
Right.
if there are going to be solutions, they're going to have to be our solutions.
Sure.
And so these exhibits are a really welcoming way to share these stories of
Mhm.
diverse backgrounds. So it's people who marched with Dr. King, and it's Holocaust survivors, and it's wounded veterans, and it's people who have dealt with substance abuse issues. It's I mean, whoever we are as human beings, there's some of that voice in this project. And we continue to try to expand that so that, people can see themselves and they can recognize themselves in this body of work.
And so how do you decide what state to travel to next? Do you go to major cities first in a specific state based on where you feel there's a need and then just kind of go from there after that? Let's say you go from Mississippi to Arkansas or Louisiana. I mean, do you just kind of just travel along and hope for the higher sources to guide you?
Uh, there's a little bit of that.
Hmm.
Some of this is a journey of discovery. And so when there's an issue that's on my heart that I want to explore a little bit, I start looking for a door to open. I start looking
Okay.
for an opportunity to have these conversations. I wanted to do something around PTSD and suicide prevention with veterans. And I had a connection with an organization that leads retreats up well, they do it all across the country, but they were leading one up in Washington State when I happened to be in that general area. And I'm like, hey, can this be our anchor? Can this be sort of our foothold into the conversation? And then once we have that big connection, we start, expanding from there. So I was, so I'm not dumb. So, I live in a van. When it's the winter, I want to be in the southern states, right? When it's the summer,
Yeah.
I want to be up north where it's cooler. Uh,
Right.
but it doesn't always work out that way. But when I wanted to talk about immigration, I had a connection of somebody who worked with activists and migrants down along the border, and she said, "Well, I'm happy to connect you with people I know." And she had a window in January last year, and so I'm like, that makes sense. Go to Arizona in January, and I had a willing partner who was going to help make a bunch of connections.
Yeah.
And then we just sort of let that play out and see who else we can meet down there.
Are you ever coming out to the West Coast? I'm in California. Do you ever
We're
come
in
out this way?
California.
Yeah,
We're in
I'm in
California.
Pasadena, California.
Oh man, I was just there, Lino.
Are you
I,
serious?
yeah. We started last summer in Los Angeles, and
Wow,
in June we started in LA, and we worked our way all the way up the coast and wound up in the fall up north of Seattle.
that's
Uh,
awesome.
Yeah, it was good. So we will be there again. I don't have anything firm on the schedule. I'm going to be, like I said, down in Utah and Nevada starting next week for a month. But then we shift gears and we head out to Washington D.C. in the mid-Atlantic states. Um, I've got some exhibits that we're putting up over there. I've got some programming that I'm doing with schools, and then I'm doing a whole bunch of stories around faith and social justice with some groups out there on the East Coast.
Now, you'd mentioned Skid Row earlier. Skid Row on the East Coast or Skid Row on the West Coast, or
In LA there.
okay. Wow. Yes.
Yeah, so I went to Union Gospel Mission and interviewed Andy Bales, who is the leader of Union Gospel Mission, but also some of the people who, uh, used to be homeless and are out, have worked through their program and are now working as staff for Union Gospel Mission. As we worked our way up the coast, um, I don't just want to talk to people who are leading organizations who help with these issues. I want to talk with people who are living this as well. So as we went up into Corvallis, Oregon, I worked with the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center and interviewed people who are currently unhoused.
Mhm.
People who have been in and out of the system and trying to figure out next steps. Because I think you have to be in proximity to these issues. You can't stand at a distance and try to talk about homelessness and figure it out. You need to sit down with people who are homeless, and you need to understand what their experience is, both to personify it and humanize that experience, but also to understand it and figure
Right.
out what the barriers are um, for folks who are unhoused.
Speaking of proximity, when you're in that close proximity with that much challenge and those many different types of challenges, what do you do to ground yourself and to keep your mental clarity?
Hmm. That's a great question. You can't be in proximity of this human pain without absorbing some of it.
Sure.
I mean, unless you're a heartless jerk, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there there are ways that you can protect yourself, but that also distances you from the issues. And so I
Yeah.
think you have to be willing to let your heart get broken a little bit in the process. That is where the cracks of compassion open up so that you can begin to deal with these issues and recognize them in their full light. But that being said, you do have to do some self-care. Um, or you burn out. People in social services burn out a lot. People who are in nonprofit work burn out a lot. um, so for me, it's the outdoors and it's music. So as we travel the country, there's this dovetail and this flow of engaging with these really heavy social issues, doing really intense public programming at colleges and universities and things like that, and then retreating a little bit into the wilderness. And we go and we park our van in some beautiful forest or next to the mountains, and we take a little bit of time to hike and recharge. And that's, that you just have to listen to your heart and know when it's time to do that.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So what's next with the piece of my mind?
Like I said, we're going to the Southwest, then we'll go out to the East Coast. I think we'll probably stay in this van for, another year or 2 years. We love the simplicity of it. I can imagine writing a book along the lines of, you know, reducing your attachment to stuff so that you can embrace these bigger issues and ideas, have the energy to embrace these other ideas.
Give yourself
Um,
more room, mental room.
yeah, exactly. You got to leave some of that literal baggage behind so that you got room to explore this other stuff. And and then maybe shift gears a little bit and do a series on self-reflection and more inner work. And then I think we're going to move on and do some international work. But this model of using storytelling and art to connect with people and to build community and to bridge divides. I can't think of what else I would rather do. To be able to go across the country and sit down and have meaningful conversations with people about all of these interesting issues is
Hmm.
a really rare and rich space to be in. And if we can keep figuring out how to put gas in the tank, we'll just keep doing it.
I'm certain you will.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
definitely will.
I'm stubborn. I appreciate that, Lena.
Well, what an incredible inspiration you are. Thank you so much for blessing us with your light and your information, your love, your passion. You're literally following your life's purpose. And this is what we all look for. It's just really mind-blowing what you're doing. I'm really excited to have had you on my show. Thank you so much for all your time and for taking time in your incredible vehicle there to talk to me. Thank you.
No, it's great. I enjoyed the conversation, Lena, and thanks for what you do as well.
Oh, you're welcome. I love it. I'm the same way as you. I just want to motivate people. And for those that don't have a voice, I bring them on whether it's their first time being interviewed or their 50th time being interviewed, whatever message is to be out, to be sent, to be taken out there, it's meant to be.
Well, I have a friend, his name is Joe Davis, and he's a spoken word artist in Minneapolis. And he's the one who introduced me to this saying that I have come to embrace. And if we can have an exchange with one another, and at the end we can both walk away feeling like we've been seen and heard and
Exactly.
valued, I think it's one of the biggest gifts we can give to one another.
Beautiful gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're an incredible gift. Thank you so much.
Thank
Do
you,
you have
Lino.
any
It's great.
questions?
No, I'm glad to be with you. I will watch for when you share this out, and I'll share it with my circle as well.
And please let me know when you're out here in Los Angeles. That way we can meet up for some coffee and have a story to tell.
I'd like that. I'll look forward to that, Lino.
What a blessing you have been. Thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.